Yes. Last but certainly not least, we have Anja giving a talk on the Ecotopia and the Commune Form, which it seems like we Philip sort of talked about the commune a bit already, but now it's sort of this looking at the commune form more specifically. I'm very excited for in that, right, that sort of the way they inform each other, these talks. So Anja H. Lind is a writer and doctoral researcher in critical future studies at TU Dresden, Germany, working on solarpunk through the energy humanities with a particular view to anarchist political philosophy and energy transition. The 1871 Paris Commune has many afterlives in political theory, fiction, and ecological movements. Kristin Ross calls this the Commune Form, tracing it to peasant resistance movements in the 1970s to the present of Occupy, pipeline resistance, and land defense. The Commune Form also emerges in literature. Anja will be tracing this historically before examining it as a motif in solarpunk novels. And I'll pass it over to you now.
Perfect. Many thanks. Thank you for the introduction. So I'm presenting today on a chapter of my PhD dissertation currently under construction, the working title of which is Solarpunk, Imagining the Future of Power, which asks whether solarpunk might give us a new way of thinking about power in both the meaning of energy and political force. This presentation intends to trace a twinned lineage, that of the commune form and the ecotopian form, both of which I see culminating in the solarpunk novel. We start in a France 150 years past. Lasting just 72 days in the spring of 1871, it's difficult to overstate the revolutionary impact of the Paris Commune on political theory, praxis, and history. Emerging at a point of crisis, against the backdrop of Napoleon III's repeated defeats against Prussia in 1870, an unpopular armistice in January of 1871, and a deeply conservative government elected to France the following February, 275,000 Parisians elected the Commune in March of 1871, alongside parallel communes across the country. A range of popular revolutionary measures were quickly instituted, such as the expropriation of workshops, requisitioning empty buildings for housing, and postponing debt obligations. Tom Moylan, one of the main scholars of utopia within science fiction studies, has described the Paris Commune as a concrete utopia, borrowing Ernst Bloch's term, an event in which, in Bloch's words, the potency of human hope links up with the potentiality within the world, stretching the horizons of both possibility and desire. Louise Michel's diagnosis in her memoirs was not dissimilar. While the commune in her figuration was only ever to end in death, and to death it came, in dying it opened wide the door to the future. That was its destiny, a profound act of prefiguration, of speculative utopian non-fiction that showed how life could be organized differently, more free, more equal. Unsurprisingly then, literary utopias proliferated in the aftermath, with Darko Suvin even pinpointing the 1st of May 1871 as the origin of science fiction in the UK. Indeed, Louise Michel herself would go on to pen 2 science fiction novels in what was planned as a galactic utopian cycle, though she only ever managed its dystopian beginnings. The connection of the commune to utopia then seems abundant, but what of its connection to ecology? There we need to turn to Kristin Ross, a preeminent scholar of the Paris Commune, who's endeavoured across multiple works to analyse its many futures and its political afterlives. In her 2016 Communal Luxury, she traces an expansive intellectual history, limited not just to the work that the communards themselves would go on to produce, but how the commune was renegotiated by the close political comrades, affinity groups, and networks that the communards went on to cultivate in exile. Thus she connects Élisée Reclus, displaced to Switzerland, to Peter Kropotkin, in exile from Russia, working closely with Reclus on shared geographical pursuits, to William Morris, a close friend of Kropotkin's and the most fervent proselytizer of the commune's memory in Britain, organising memorials annually. Rooting Kropotkin and Morris in the context of the commune, an unusual context for the pair, was one of Ross's goals for the volume, and is the predication for her reading of the Paris Commune as, at least from the perspective of intellectual history, a key moment in the development of ecology. There was no question for any of them, Reclus, Kropotkin, or Morris, of reform or of a piecemeal solution. nature's repair could only come about through the complete dismantling of international commerce and the capitalist system. Ecology demanded a revolutionary change in socio-political organization. It's Ross's 2024 Commune Form, however, which is the primary vehicle for my argument. She posits here that the Paris Commune paradigmatically formulated a political mode, at once a mobilization and a territory shared in common, gaining literal ground against the historical enclosures. The Commune Form is a collective elaboration of a desired way of life, one that is directly democratic and ecological, a quotidian revolution where the means become the end. This commune form of territorial solidaric praxis, she argues, has re-emerged at key points in history. With the communalist movements of the 1960s and 70s, such as the Black Panther Party's dual power communes in Detroit, and rather than Paris 1968, Nantes 1968, which saw occupations by a diverse alliance of farmers, workers, and students. Through the 70s, Ross traces the commune form across international farmer resistances to airports, army training grounds, before moving to the last 15 years as a reinvigoration, a renewal of the form after a long period of dormancy. With Occupy in the bottom left, indigenous pipeline resistances such as No DAPL in the top left, and the French ZADs on the right, a statist acronym meaning Zones of Deferred Development, areas to be cleansed of humans and ecology to make way for state projects, that's been retooled by land defenders to mean zones to defend. Ross paints these land defences in lineage with the Paris Commune, expressing an ecologically infused communalism, a praxis of both place and people, flexibly accommodated to each locale. Ross's expansive and ultimately ecological account of the commune makes visible, I argue, a concurrent literary lineage hitherto unrecognised, the role of the Paris Commune in fomenting the ecotopia. What I'm suggesting in this chapter is that the Ecotopia presents a literary analogue to the commune form. Where one manifests, so does the other in mutually implicating relation. I've organised this lineage around the three main historical moments Ross herself has chosen, directly after the Paris Commune, the communalist movements of the 60s and 70s, and our post-Occupy present. The crack signifies the oft-postulated death of utopia in science fiction studies into the 80s, 90s, and noughties, and the parallel dormancy of Ross's real-world commune form. My selection of work here leans on the chronology that Marius de Gaius proposes in his 1999 monograph Ecological Utopias, which includes the four highlighted books or figures, alongside a variety of others, but doesn't include any discussion of the Paris Commune. I shan't sum up every work here, but it behooves mentioning that William Morris's 1890 News from Nowhere has been referred to as the first modern work of ecotopian fiction, and Ross's own brief reading of it situates it as specifically Paris communalist. It is, after all, a stateless ecotopia premised on the unit of the parish or commune. Kropotkin's Conquest of Bread includes a similarly ecotopian vision directly inspired by the commune, and one that would inspire Aldous Huxley's one utopian work in turn, the 1962 Ecotopia Island, which he described as his Kropotkonian novel. Amidst the communal movements taking place in the long 1960s, Murray Bookchin was formulating what would go on to become his life's work of communalist theory, the first glimpses of which come in his 1971 post-scarcity Anarchism. Identified by de Gaius as a crucial node in ecotopian history, his communalist theory makes Bookchin an obviously crucial node in the Paris Commune's history too, the most obvious meeting point of the ecotopia and the commune form. Bookchin, alongside all the classic anarchists, such as Kropotkin and doubtless Michel too, would go on to inspire Le Guin in her writing of The Dispossessed, a commonly seen antecedent of solarpunk. Finally, the contemporary revival of the commune form occurs simultaneously with the emergence of solarpunk as a mode. Each stage critical to the commune form, in other words, is critical to the ecotopia. Now, were this the evidence for my argument alone, this would be intriguing but far from conclusive. At least the latter two moments, I can see you think, simply correspond to the evolution of the environmental movement, the origin of which most trace to the early 1960s, importantly negotiated up until the end of the 70s, and similarly experiencing some kind of fall from the public eye until the present. The primary evidence I offer for the entwined lineage of the ecotopian and commune forms, however, is expressed at the level of content, the political mode of communalism, as best formulated by Bookchin, predominating across the narratives of ecotopias. This is especially true of Marge Piercy's Woman on the Edge of Time, which we've just heard about. The one detail I'll add is that Piercy's Ecotopia is the only example I know of which depicts a specifically federated communalism in literature, and is an ecotopia, like Bookchin's, Kropotkin's, and Morris's, that becomes such through the content of the Paris Commune's politics. The same is true, I argue, for much of Solarpunk. The first Solarpunk novel to be published, Elijah G's 2012-2014 Suncatcher, concerns a floating solar community explicitly labelled a commune, a collection of airships organised without hierarchy, living outside of dystopian techno-capitalism, harvesting solar energy and selling it to the grid when they dock. Sim Kern's 2023 The Free People's Village, an alternate history Occupy novel, manifests its own commune form in the titular libertarian Villages, a form that spreads globally to resist racial capitalism and is initially erected to defend an impoverished black US neighborhood against a planned oil pipeline. The land defense mounted by the Villages is one of the clearest examples of the commune form in Solarpunk, according to a diversity of Ross's specific characteristics. Finally, Serena Ulibarri's 2023 Another Life, concerning an ecotopian intentional community founded in Death Valley, is an explicitly communalist novel, directly inspired by Peter Kropotkin and Murray Bookchin. Perhaps nowhere else is the lineage I'm drawing more obvious than from the Paris Commune to Kropotkin, from Kropotkin to Bookchin, both of which are central nodes in De Geus's ecotopian chronology, and both of which culminate in Another Life. It's Bright Flames 2024 The Working, however, that I'd like to zoom in on in closing. Following a coven of 5 witches, The Working narrates a simultaneously metaphysical and material struggle to save the world, primarily from climate change, though nuclear holocaust looms in the background too. The main setting, where the coven congregates, is the forest where one witch lives, under threat from a planned fracking pipeline, the state threatening to eminent domain her land if she does not sell, so the private gas company can demolish the woods. Parallel to this conflict, when the coven trances together and visits the astral plane, they come across a great monster, the metaphysical summation of all the ills that the material world seems threatened by, the archetype of harm. An impossibly horrid mess that towered over them like a skyscraper, as if all the oil derricks in the world, all the fracking wells and chemical plants belching smoke, stacks flaring fire, plus skyscrapers, bank edifices, satellites, congealed together, emerging out of a vast fracking field of chemical waste and oil pits. This archetype of harm is plainly fossil capital, the combination of capitalism's self-aggrandizing urbanization, as we've heard about in the keynote, meshed with the infrastructure of fossil fuel extraction on the body of extractivism's sacrifice zones. More than this, however, it's a specifically racialized fossil capital, black and brown bodies feeding the furnace as if compelled, their lives fed this supremacist, dominating machine. This evokes what Dominic Boyer has called sucropolitics, and what Donna Haraway and others have called the plantationocene, how the original energy techniques of enslaved black bodies and sugar plantations form the groundwork for the world-ending spectre of petrocapitalism. But how can this very archetype of harm be bested? How is this petro-horror overcome? For the working, it is quite plainly through the materiality of the commune form. The witches occupy the forest, with a host of solidaric strangers, defending it with their bodies. The whole abomination is bested by direct action, chaining themselves to the extractive machines. In suggesting that a single, local, communalist victory may take on metaphysical importance, that it's somehow a coherent response to the clearly global crisis of climate change, Bright Flame is levelling a significant challenge to the internationalism of much contemporary environmentalism, a challenge that resonates, in my view, across much of the solarpunk corpus and emerges through the entwined lineages of the ecotopian and commune forms. This approach chimes with contemporary ecological anarchists, such as Xander Dunlap and Peter Gelderloos, who insist on the related common sense that all pollution has a location, that all extraction takes place somewhere, and that these extractive conflicts are battles that not only can, but are being won through the employment of the commune form. Such a local, situated, ecological communalism, in Kristin Ross's words, takes the overly abstract call to save the climate and brings it down to earth, in fact, and quite pragmatically, to particular plots of earth. This is the commune form for our own time, and solarpunk is the literary corollary to just that form, as the Ecotopia has been ever since William Morris's News from Nowhere. Thanks for your time.